You better subscribe to Behind the Veil Truths, or I'll whack you myself.
Sammy the Bull, Gravano's life story is one of crime, loyalty, betrayal, and survival in the dangerous world of the Mafia. His rise from a troubled childhood in Bensonhurst to the inner circles of the Gambino family reflects both cunning and brutality. Born in 1945, Salvatore Gravano struggled academically, suffering from dyslexia that made conventional schooling difficult. By age 16, he had already learned that asserting himself through violence was his best strategy for respect and safety. He started stealing at just 8 years old, quickly learning that force could command authority. Joining the local street gang, the Rampers, at 13, he gained a reputation for fighting and toughness. The gang members soon nicknamed him the Bull, a moniker that would stick for life. His reputation grew as he got into more serious crimes like hijacking and armed robbery. The local mafiosi took notice of his fighting skills and potential, leading to his first cold-blooded murder at a young age. Sammy's violent reputation caught the attention of the Mafia, and he was soon in debt to them after they returned a stolen bike he had taken. After a stint in the army, Gravano married Deborah Shabetta, although their marriage would become complicated by his criminal lifestyle. "I had to do things I wasn't proud of," Sammy later confessed about his early crimes. He arranged the killing of Deborah's brother 7 years into their marriage, a grim testament to his ruthless nature. His criminal activities escalated into larceny, hijacking, and even murder, making him a feared figure in New York's underworld. His connection to the Colombo family was significant, and he hoped to become a made man when the membership ban was lifted. However, conflicts within his original family led him to switch allegiance to the Gambino family, seeking better opportunities. Under Salvatore Orello's mentorship, Gravano got involved in construction, gaining huge kickbacks for concrete work. He also developed a passion for boxing and bodybuilding, consuming steroids that fueled his short temper and violent tendencies. "The steroids made me reckless," Gravano admitted. "I got to the point where I killed on a whim." He murdered Joe Colucci, a move that solidified his reputation but also drew police attention. "Colucci's murder was a turning point," Sammy said. "It showed I was ready to do anything to protect my position." In the Mafia, loyalty was everything, but Gravano's aggressive behavior caused trouble with his superiors, especially Paul Castellano. Castellano often scolded him for killing without permission, but Gravano paid little heed to authority. His association with John Gotti was pivotal. Together they plotted to kill Castellano and Bellotti, violating Mafia rules. "The hit was daring," Gravano recalled. "We took a risk, but it was necessary to shake things up." Their plan succeeded, and Castellano was shot dead outside Sparks Steakhouse, a sensational hit that shocked all of New York. However, such bold moves made Gotti, in particular, a target for rival families, especially the Genovese and Lucchese. "They wanted Gotti dead," Sammy explained. "It was a war waiting to happen." Gotti narrowly escaped an assassination attempt when a car bomb intended for him killed his underboss Frank DeCicco instead. While Gotti was imprisoned on racketeering charges, Gravano and Angelo Ruggiero had to manage the Gambino family in his absence. Back in prison, Gotti called the shots, maintaining control over their criminal empire from behind bars. "We were running the family from the inside," Sammy said. "It wasn't easy but necessary." The tension between legality and crime became more evident as Gravano's criminal career deepened. Living a double life, Gravano described it, 1 foot in the mob, 1 foot in the real world. His notoriety grew, but so did the danger. Enemies everywhere, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Gravano's involvement in 19 murders was a brutal testament to his ruthlessness and survival instinct. "It shows you how complicated mob war can get," Sammy remarked. "Greed, power, deception, all driven by the dark side of human nature." Eventually, the law caught up with Gravano, and he faced the inevitability of betrayal and alliance shifts. "I decided to turn state's evidence," Sammy explained, "to save myself and maybe bring some justice." His decision to become an informant shocked the Mafia world, turning former allies into enemies overnight. "It was one of the hardest choices I ever made," Gravano admitted, but staying silent was no longer an option. Gotti was convicted largely thanks to Gravano's testimony, ending his reign and his life behind bars in 2002. "When I testified," Gravano reflected, "it was to end the bloodshed and bring some peace." His life story, told in Underboss with Peter Moss, detailed the brutal art of the mob hit and inner secrets of Cosa Nostra. "It's not glamorous," Gravano warned. "It's violence, deception, and betrayal, the reality of mob life." Gravano's story remains a powerful warning about the perilous world of organized crime and its seductive grip. You can't escape it, he said finally. Once you're in for life unless you make a choice. His journey from a Brooklyn kid to a feared mobster, and finally an informant, exemplifies the tragic complexity of the criminal world. Gravano and Ruggiero fell out, while Gravano went on an unauthorized killing spree, even murdering his own men. However, Ruggiero fell from favor when he was indicted for distributing heroin on the evidence of federal wiretaps. He died of cancer soon after. Gravano was appointed consigliere. When Louis Melito, a friend of Gravano's since his days in the Rampers, objected, he was killed. He also set up Tommy Sparrow and Capo di Bernardo. Even though Gravano had been promoted consigliere, then underboss, Gotti still used him as an assassin, even having him drive the getaway car on one occasion. When Gotti was tried for assault and racketeering in 1986, Gravano paid a juror to find him not guilty. Gotti then earned the nickname the Teflon Don. The newspapers were also calling him the Dapper Don because of his sharp suits, hand-painted ties. But Gravano was unhappy at Gotti attracting too much attention to their activities, particularly as he very publicly held court in the Ravenite Social Club in Manhattan's Little Italy. Gravano's involvement in the hit on Simone began with a completely unrelated event. For Sammy, it began when Toto Aurello said, "Take a ride with me up by Paul's." Two aging members of Aurello's crew, Nicky Russo and pal Joey, operated in New Jersey. Toto told Paul that this Nick Russo's son was killed in some dispute by a Frankie Steele, who headed up a powerful Irish gang over there. Russo naturally wanted to avenge his son's murder. One night, down around Philadelphia, he comes on Steele, who is alone in a car. He took a shot at Steele and misses. Steele comes back at him and shoots Russo in the leg. When Steele moves in to finish him off, his gun jams. He starts beating Russo on the head with it. He's going to beat him to death, but Russo manages to get in another shot and hits Steele in the stomach. Steele took off and Russo is still alive by the skin of his teeth. Toto told Paul that Russo and pal Joey are old guys. They can't win. They are outnumbered, outgunned, and out everything. They need help. Paul listens and says, "All right." He looks at me and says, "Sammy, you want to go on this?" I said, "Of course, Paul, whatever you want." He tells me to choose anybody I need. Paul said, "Whack him out, and anybody in his gang who gets in the way." I go down to Jersey and meet with Nicky Russo, but Steele wasn't stupid. He wasn't making it easy to find him. I knew he'd been shot, and I checked all Philadelphia area hospitals. There was no record of any hospital admissions. Then I found out that he had made a visit to an undertaker to remove Russo's bullet. Jesus, I thought, this guy has balls. But the most important thing I found out was that some made guys in the Philadelphia family got him to the undertaker. Steele is hanging out with them. This changed everything. If and when I find him and start shooting, suppose he's with a wise guy. I won't know who's who, and I could take some made guys out causing big trouble. I report this to Paul and he agrees, I said. In the Philadelphia War, Paul has sided with Nicky Scarfo and tells me to notify Scarfo of what was going on. I explained the situation to Nicky Scarfo, and he says, "Sammy, let me do this." This still doesn't satisfy my problem. He mentioned Steele had a baby son or brother, and he wants the kid killed, like in the old country. I told him, "You got to go back to Paul on this one. I am not killing a baby." "You got to go back to Paul on this one," I said. "I am not killing a baby." When Paul is told about this, he becomes irritated with Russo, telling him it's over with. "Steele, the guy who killed my son, is gone. Enough is enough. Case closed," he says. I think that's it and go back to my business. But before I know it, I'm up to see Paul about some construction stuff. He is fuming. Veins are popping out of his neck. His face is red as a pepper. He's just been to a commission meeting, which has already voted to back Nicky Scarfo in Philadelphia. He is told that Scarfo protests that his main competition, Johnny Keys, John Simone, had been seen with a Gambino family member in Jersey. And who is it? Nicky Russo and pal Joey. Scarfo assumes the worst, thinking the Gambino family supports Johnny Keys' bid for power. This distrust demonstrates how distrust breeds distrust within Cosa Nostra. It's a major, major embarrassment for Paul. The commission sanctioned a hit on Johnny Keys and gave the contract to the Gambino family. Paul wants to see Russo. Toto and I bring him to Paul's estate. We're out by the Olympic-sized swimming pool he has in back. Russo saves his life by convincing him that his meetings with Johnny Keys were innocent. He said they had been friends for 100 years. He swears that anything they had to do with each other was purely social. No family business was ever discussed. Now, deception is at the core of a clean mob hit, and it's absolutely essential. It knows no bounds, and Paul has learned that Johnny Keys reached out to the Cleveland family boss for support. But the old Cleveland boss betrays him and reports the overture to the commission. The Cleveland boss is advised to pass the word to Keys that Paul was interested in being on his side against the Scarfo faction. Paul is still fuming, and he looks directly at me saying, "Sammy, you're in charge. I want this done right." He tells me to use Louis Melito and anyone else I want. Russo will do this to perfection, but he's eager to get the keys hit over and done with to prove his innocence. Russo says he can set it up right away with a simple plan. He plans for himself and pal Joey to meet Keys at a South Jersey ice cream place called Friendly's. They always sat in the same booth in the back, and Keys doesn't know me or Louis. The plan is for Louis and me to be in booths nearby, observing and waiting for the signal. When Keys arrives, they'll wave, and as he passes, I will follow and shoot him towards Russo and pal Joey. Louis will then take out his hidden sawed-off shotgun, fire shots in the ceiling, and yell for everyone to hit the floor, then we'll flee. The plan sounded good, but I wanted to check every angle, so I suggested a dry run. In Friendly's, I realized it was impossible because families and kids were present. There was no way I was shooting in front of children, so I told Russo the plan was nuts. My first meeting with Johnny Keys was at a luncheonette near Trenton. Soon after that, he was excited to be with Paul Castellano's messenger and recounted details about Angelo Bruno's murder. He was direct and wanted Paul's approval for his attempt to control the Philadelphia family. He talked to me alone, but he arrived with bodyguards outside, whom he apologized for. He also showed me his gun. He wanted to believe I was Paul Castellano's eyes, ears, and mouth. But he was also cautious and shrewd. I wasn't careless either. I had no gun on me, and I didn't know what to expect. When he was sure I was unarmed, he eased up, and we talked some more. I told him to plan a follow-up meeting after I reported his messages to Paul. Another meeting was necessary to lull him into complete security, so I told Louis Melito and Stymie it would be tough because he was very sharp. The next meeting was at a very public bar and restaurant in Jersey. He followed the same security procedures and searches as he did the first time, and of course I was unarmed. He came with bodyguards, and this meeting was to put the icing on the plan's cake. I brought him welcome news, looked him straight in the eye, and told him Paul Castellano supported his bid to take over the Philadelphia family. I really laid it on thick, saying Gambino's support included money, guns, and shooters. Johnny Keys was almost speechless when I told him Paul would get the commission's backing after Nicky Scarfo was dead. I was on a roll and shared more good news, advising him to find a secure place for another meeting with Paul. He needed this face-to-face meeting where Paul would confirm everything I just related. Suddenly his face lit up as he announced a perfect place, a country club near Yardville, just off the New York Turnpike. He believed nobody there would recognize Big Paul, and I agreed to the plan and promised to get back to him. Nick Russo was against the country club because of its public nature and security staff, but I decided to check it myself. It's good because Johnny Keys would be comfortable there, I argued, and confirmed he couldn't have his goons with him during the meeting. All of us, me, Nicky Russo, and pal Joey, met with Keys in Yardville before heading to the club, without guns. I had a hidden gun under the front passenger seat of the car, but I hadn't grabbed it yet. Keys joined us and pal Joey drove, with him sitting up front and Keys and Russo in the back, and Keys apologized for being armed. He was concerned about Paul's reaction, I said, but I reassured him that Paul understood the war happening. He frisked us, tutting and patting us down, but I saw he didn't have bodyguards or was being tailed. The country club had a large parking lot, and I saw the van from our crew parked between us and the clubhouse. As we got out, I looked at my watch, told Keys Paul would arrive any minute, and I hadn't yet taken my gun. We walked toward the clubhouse, passing the van, with me and Keys behind and pal Joey and Russo ahead, seeming normal. Keys kept his hand on his coat's gun butt and kept looking around, suddenly attracted to the van. "Hey, Sammy, that van's engine is running," he suddenly said, concerned. I leaped at him, wrapping him in a bear hug, catching him by surprise, and held him so tight he couldn't move his arms. I didn't want him to bring up his gun, and this all happened quickly, but felt slow motion in my mind. I felt a surge of power and confidence, knowing this was going to work, and the van's side door opened. Louis and Stymie came out, grabbed Keys' legs, and together we lifted him into the van. From the corner of my eye, I saw a few people on the green, curious, but unaware of what was happening. My mind wasn't in slow motion. Keys was on the van's floor, and it wasn't graceful. I was still holding him, and Stymie was on top of both me and Keys. It was like the three of us were one person, intertwined in the chaos. Louis got in the driver's seat, and pal Joey was next to him. I yelled to Stymie that Keys was still trying for his gun. Stymie pried his thumb from the gun's butt, nearly breaking it, and we got the weapon. Louis immediately took off, and the van jumped the parking lot curb. It went over part of the club's lawn and out onto the street, leaving Nicky Russo behind with our car. After we finished tying Keys up with heavy plastic ties, I felt pretty smug. Everything was going according to plan. The original idea was to kill Johnny Keys near the club, but pal Joey realized he still had the car keys in his pocket. The car was stranded, and my hidden gun was inside it, risking potential witnesses seeing our moves. We needed to get Russo and the car out of there quickly to avoid exposure. I had Louis stop the van, let pal Joey out, and gave him instructions to return to the country club and meet Russo. Pal Joey was to get the car and wait for my call, so I could confirm everything was clear and safe. After pal Joey left, we headed for Staten Island, and Johnny suddenly claimed he was having a seizure or heart attack. He whispered for me to reach into his jacket for nitroglycerin pills and begged me to give him one, fearing he would die. Seeing him plead and knowing we'd kill him, I realized he was a true man's man, a real Cosa Nostra type. His stature rose in my eyes when we arrived at Staten Island's toll plaza. Surprisingly, he made no attempt to cause trouble to attract police attention. I whispered to Stymie to be ready if Keys tried anything, but Johnny didn't try to resist or act out of desperation. His calmness was because he believed it was a family affair, and there would be no police involved. We arrived at a gas station owned by Louis Melito's guys, and we lay over, waiting without knowing the delay reason. I kept calling Russo's house, but no answer, and I realized they had escaped, avoiding arrest for murder if I killed Keys. If they were caught, I would have told Paul it was a mess, and it was his decision what to do next. The wait at the gas station was long, 10 or 12 hours, and Johnny had no idea what was causing the delay. I explained to him that a decision was being made by the bosses, telling him each time I called that I was checking on the outcome. During the wait, Johnny, a cousin of Angelo Bruno, vented his anger at the Genovese family, blaming their greed for the chaos. He criticized Vincent Gigante, the Chin, for conning the commission into sanctioning Bruno's hit with brutal tactics used on Tony Bananas. Johnny expressed how the life we led was poisoning our morals and leading many good people to die, yet he maintained his composure.
You press that button, or I press you.
He asked that if he lost with the bosses and was sentenced to die, a made guy should do it. He said he promised himself and his wife he would die with his shoes off. If the decision came against him, would I take them off? Of course, I said. I never asked him why. The more we talked, the more I respected him genuinely. When I sent Louis and Stymie out for food and coffee, he told us to hold the sugar for him. Later, I heard a noise outside the van and drew my gun, thinking it might be a nosy cop. He whispered, "If it's a cop, shoot him before you shoot me," shaking my resolve. It reminded me of the toll booth. No police involved in family business, but it wasn't a cop. It was Louis and Stymie returning from the run. Later, Louis and Stymie told me that during my call to Russo, Johnny admitted he had underestimated me, feeling caught unawares for the first time. He told them he was responsible for about 50 hits, but said I did the best setup he'd ever seen. Finally, I made contact with Nicky Russo. He and pal Joey were safe and told to come to our location. I was outside the van when they arrived. They said there was confusion back at the country club, but pal Joey got Russo away without issues. This was bad news for Johnny Keys, and I told him that the decision had gone against him. He accepted silently, showing true manliness and respect. Stimmy, Louie, and I were all unhappy about what was happening, but understood it was the order from the boss and the entire commission. We drove to a wooded back road in Staten Island, and I remembered Johnny's request about his shoes. I took them off as he requested. Pal Joey tried to pull him out, but Johnny kicked Joey in the chest and declared, "I'll walk out on my own. Let me die like a man." He took 5 or 6 steps, lowered his head, and walked quietly and dignified, displaying true bravery with no words spoken. I nodded at Louis Melito, and as Johnny wished, Louis shot him in the back of the head with a .357 Magnum, killing him instantly, with dignity and without pain. Russo and pal Joey were sent back to Jersey, and Louis, Stymie, and I drove away in silence, nobody speaking a word. The next morning, the news reported that John Simone's body was found by 2 sanitation workers, bringing the story to light. I then visited Paul Castellano, explaining why the hit had to be changed from Jersey to Staten Island due to the circumstances. Paul smiled, put his arm around my shoulder, and said he was proud of Sammy the Bull. I had to confess to Paul that I felt sick about the killing, as Johnny embodied everything our life was supposed to be. Looking him straight in the eye, I said, "This is one hit I'm never going to be proud of." On 11 December 1990, FBI agents and New York City detectives raided a nightclub and arrested several notorious figures. Among those taken into custody were Gravano, Gotti, Gotti's new consigliere Frank Locascio, and Thomas Gambino. The authorities had wiretaps that revealed Gotti denigrating Gravano, accusing him of creating a family within a family. It seemed to Gravano that Gotti was planning to portray him as a crazed killer who he had tried to restrain. This impression was reinforced when Gotti told Gravano that he was not to speak to his lawyers unless he was present. Feeling betrayed and cornered, Gravano decided to turn state's evidence in exchange for a reduced sentence. Gotti was ultimately sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Gravano received a 20-year sentence but was soon released into the Witness Protection Program. After entering the program, Gravano left New York and relocated to Arizona to start anew. In Arizona, he reconnected with his son, who introduced him to a white supremacist gang known as the Devil Dogs. Gradually, Gravano became involved in trafficking ecstasy, a dangerous and lucrative trade. His criminal activities caught the attention of law enforcement once again, leading to his arrest. He was sentenced to 19 years in an Arizona state prison for his involvement in drug trafficking. During this tumultuous period, more murder allegations surfaced against Gravano, brought forth by Richard Kuklinski. Kuklinski, known as the Iceman, was a notorious hitman who claimed Gravano's complicity in various murders. However, Kuklinski died before his case could go to trial, leaving many questions unanswered. Despite his criminal past, Gravano's life was defined by a series of dramatic turns and devastating betrayals. His arrest marked a pivotal moment that shifted the course of his life forever. Testimonies against him helped secure convictions and dismantle parts of the organized crime network. In prison, Gravano reflected on his choices and the violent world he had been deeply immersed in. He realized that his testimony had saved him from a life sentence and possibly death. After his release, Gravano sought a new identity. Leaving behind his past affiliations and enemies, he found solace in the quiet deserts of Arizona, away from the chaos of his former life. Yet the shadows of his past occasionally haunted him, especially with lingering murder allegations. His story became a cautionary tale about the dark allure of power, loyalty, and betrayal. The infamous mobster turned informant struggled to reconcile his former self with the man he hoped to become. His interactions with the Devil Dogs introduced him to a new, perilous world of drug trafficking and violence. Gravano's involvement with ecstasy was driven partly by financial desperation and the desire for respect. Law enforcement agencies actively sought to bring him back to justice, but he managed to evade capture for a time. The death of Kuklinski deprived authorities of a key witness who could have implicated Gravano further. Throughout his later years, Gravano grappled with guilt, regret, and a desire for redemption. He often wondered whether his testimony truly helped to dismantle organized crime or simply shifted its centers. His tumultuous life story encapsulated the perilous nature of crime and the complex web of loyalty and betrayal. From arrest in courtrooms to prisons and clandestine dealings, Gravano's life was a roller coaster of upheaval. He had gone from a feared mobster to a key witness, and finally to a man seeking a fresh start in the desert. Yet the legacy of his deeds continued to cast a long shadow over his later life. His journey underscored the costly price of living a life immersed in violence and crime. In interviews and reflections, Gravano often admitted the heavy toll it took on his conscience. His story remains a stark reminder of how lives can be forever altered by choices made in the dark. Despite everything, Gravano hoped that someday he might find peace away from the chaos. The tale of his rise and fall illustrates the intricate and often tragic reality of organized crime. It also highlights how the pursuit of power, money, and loyalty can lead to inevitable destruction. In the end, Gravano's life was a testament to the unpredictable and often cruel nature of the criminal world. His experience serves as a cautionary chapter for those tempted by the seductions of crime, and his story, rich with betrayal, law, and redemption, continues to captivate those interested in the darker side of justice. My brother-in-law had come back and said, "John wants to see you right now, immediately." I got in the car and go to this restaurant in Queens where John is. He says, "Well, we got problems." I know, I said. I don't know what the fuck is going on, but we definitely have problems. For 4 months since Sparks, we thought it was over. No problems. And here's Frankie, all at once, blown to bits. I'm still at the restaurant when one of John's people walks in and says, "John, Frankie's dead." They said he died on the way to the hospital. He was already dead on the street, I thought. He had nothing left in him. John said the only thing was to stay on full alert and see what came next, what we could find out. It looked like there could be a war after all. Our first thought was the Genovese family, but the Chin was a real stickler for the rules of our life, and one was you don't use bombs. Nobody had pulled off a bombing in New York since the beginning of Cosa Nostra. Would Chin break this kind of rule? Was Frankie fucking some guy's wife that we didn't know about? Maybe Greaseballs from Sicily did it. Paul had a lot of connections over there, and in Sicily, they bomb all the time. When I went back to Tally's, I told everybody to keep their eyes and ears open, report anything they picked up. But there wasn't anything, not a peep. Everything stayed quiet. It seemed like whoever was behind this was willing to settle for the satisfaction of taking down Frankie. It was only a long, long time afterwards that I found out what happened and that it was Frankie and John they were really after. The they being Gaspipe Casso from the Lucchese family and Chin Gigante. I was shocked. It goes to show how Cosa Nostra was just one double cross after another. We had reached out and got Gaspipe's tacit approval about Paul. Maybe Chin doesn't know this. But after Paul goes down, Chin grabs Gaspipe. They had a relationship and says, well, Paul's out of the picture. Let's take out John Gotti and Frankie DeCicco. It'll be a real hit parade. They tell Jimmy Brown and Danny Marino what they're going to do and that Jimmy and Danny will be appointed by the commission as a committee to run the Gambino family for Chin. Let me tell you what a stand-up guy Jimmy Brown is. If some black guy walked in and said he just killed Paul Castellano and was the new boss, Jimmy would say, gee, great. What do you want me to do, boss? So basically the Genovese and Lucchese families would control our family. Gaspipe was a couple of blocks away when the bomb went off. The mistake was using a couple of West Side guys associated with the Genovese people. I still don't know who they were or if they're even alive. One of them put the bomb under Frankie's car. The other was on the remote control. When he sees Frankie come out of the club with Frankie Hartz, he thinks Frankie Hartz was John. Frankie Hartz has kind of the same build as John and the same grayish hair, and he presses the button. Boom! I got along good with Gaspipe. I still like him. For him, it was business, a master Cosa Nostra double-cross scheme, nothing personal. The only thing I didn't like was the bomb. I would have more respect for him if he used a gun, according to rules. I think the bomb was a devious Chin idea to make us think Sicilians did it. I heard when my name came up, Gaspipe said, forget it. We're not going to kill Sammy. That would have been another mistake. If John had been in the car and they put in Jimmy Brown and Marino, I would have killed them both. They were the true betrayers. They knew what was going to happen, and then I would have gone after Gaspipe and Chin. I don't think I could have won, but I would have fought until my death. Besides his toes, Frankie Hartz got mangled up a little. But he survived. That was how I found out what was going on just before the blast. I decided one thing. I used to drive myself. I was getting a driver. Not to say that joke line like in movies where the old boss tells his wife, go start the car. But to never leave my car alone anymore so nobody can fuck with it. The bombing of Frank DeCicco, retaliation and betrayal. On Sunday, 13th April 1986, like politicians rallying loyal supporters, Gotti and DeCicco planned to visit the Veterans and Friends Club in Bensonhurst, the headquarters of the family's private trash-collecting capo, Jimmy Brown Failla. Sammy also would be on hand. We're doing our little stops, Sammy said, gathering power and strength, building momentum. Me and Frankie get there. We have coffee. See the boys. Do a little, hey, how you doing? Good to see you. And then John gives a call. He can't make it. He'll meet us in the city. Frankie tells me this. So we plan to go to the city in Frankie's Buick Electra, but we stay for a while doing our thing, talking to the boys. Then this guy, Frankie Hartz, Frank Bellino, comes over and asks Frankie DeCicco, hey, do you have a card for that lawyer, Alaroni? And Frankie says, yeah, I think I got it. He looks through his wallet, all the other cards he's got in his pocket, but he doesn't have it. He says, you know what? It's probably in the fucking car in the glove compartment. I said, Frank, you want me to get it? And he says, no, you'll never find it. There's a lot of shit in there. Come on, he says to Frankie Hartz. I'm sure it's there. And they both walk out of the club. I'm still inside the club. From what I heard later, as they walk across the street, they could see a bag under the car. A paper bag. Frankie DeCicco joked with Frankie Hartz. Look at that bag. There's probably a bomb under my car. He don't think any more about it. It's an absolute rule in Cosa Nostra that you don't use bombs. Frankie DeCicco opens up the door and slides in on the passenger side, and he's looking through the glove compartment while Frankie Hartz is standing there. That's when the bomb went off. Frankie Hartz goes flying backwards. The blast blew his shoes off. And his toes. When I heard the explosion, I didn't think of a car. It was so fucking powerful, it sounded like a whole building blew up, a boiler or something. I came out of the club, and Frankie's car is in fucking flames. And there's Frankie Hartz with the blood shooting out of his feet. I go flying across the street. I saw Frankie DeCicco laying on the ground beside the car. With the fire, it could blow again. I tried to pull him away. I grabbed a leg, but he ain't coming with it. The leg is off. One of his arms is off. His Uncle Georgie came running over with another guy, Butterass, and a guy named Oscar. They're trying to help me. I got my hand under him, and my hand went right through his body to his stomach. There's no ass. His balls, everything is completely blown off. Just then a police van comes by on patrol. It backs in and they lower the tailgate and we pick Frankie up, holding whatever we can of him together, and put him in the van. Then they got Frankie Hartz and put him in the van, and they shoot off for Victory Memorial Hospital. I was wearing a white shirt. I looked at my shirt, amazed. There wasn't a drop of blood on it. The force of the blast, the concussion, blew most of the fluids right out of Frankie's body. He had no blood left in him, nothing, not an ounce. I told my brother-in-law, Eddie Garafola, who had tried to help me with Frankie, to get going right away and go to John's club. I said, he's supposed to meet us in the city, but he's in Queens still. Tell him what happened. Then I told him to get all my guys to meet at my place, Tally's, and to come heavy. Everybody who is in the club is out on the street. I looked over and I thought Danny Marino had the strangest expression on his face. He's with Jimmy Brown's crew, and him and Jimmy were waiting at Sparks for Paul. But I thought then that he was just scared. I'm telling them all to go to Tally's. Jimmy Brown said he'd be at home if I needed him. Danny Marino said the same thing. A guy named Paulie, a maid guy in the family, comes near me and says, "What the fuck good are they at home?" That remark never left me. In my head, I was thinking it was true who needed them at home, but I didn't even answer. I was too busy. I said, "Okay, you have been like a father to me. I'll take the crew and you'll be dealing directly with the administration of the family." "That'll be great," he said. He shakes my hand and gives me a kiss and says, "Be careful." I set up an appointment with John, Frankie, and Toto, where Toto asks official permission to step down. They give it, and that same night they make me a capo. John makes some other moves. He appoints his brother Jeannie a captain, and he breaks Tony Scotto down from being a captain to a soldier. Scotto had been away for payoffs and tax evasion. I happened to be at Paul's when Tony had recommended Sonny Ciccone to be acting captain to run the dock workers in his absence. Tony had mixed in with a lot of celebrities, politicians, like that guy running for president, Eugene McCarthy, entertainers, whatever. And John wasn't too fond of him, so he replaced him officially with Sonny. Now was the point to see if we were going to get retaliation from any of the other families, if there would be a war. So we sent out committees to notify them that we had elected a new boss, who our new boss and underboss was, who our new captains were. We said, "This is our new administration. We're still investigating the Paul situation. There are no problems in our family. We don't want no sanctions against us. And we want our commission seat." We got recognition from every family, including the Genovese family, except the Genovese people said that there was a rule broken, that this situation with Paul had to be put to rest, and someday somebody would have to answer for that. If and when the commission ever got together again, we said, "Don't worry. As soon as we find out, we will retaliate. Until then, we're just going to run our family." We had our commission seat, and from what we thought, it didn't seem like there was going to be any war. There wasn't going to be anything. It had gone up as high as the commission level, and there wasn't any opposition in any way, shape, or form. Frankie and me had still been hiding out with guns in a safe house set up by Joe Watts. We were still tight, but after about a month, we started to loosen up somewhat. And then, about 3 months after this had happened, consolidating power, post-Castellano Gambino family. We had to have a meeting of the captains in the family, Sammy said. Frankie DeCicco spoke to me about doing it in Caesars East. We rushed the meeting. It was a couple of days after Paul went down. After the regular customers cleared out, all the captains met downstairs at a long table, except Tommy Gambino, who I don't believe we called. The drivers and anybody else that was brought stayed upstairs. The only ones down there who wasn't a captain was Angelo and me. We stayed behind everybody at each side of the table. We had guns. You could say we were there for intimidating purposes. Joe Gallo was at the head of the table. Frankie and John were on each side of him. He was our consigliere. With Paul gone and Neil being dead, he was now in official control of the family. He was an old-timer, and he's playing this game with the captains. He knew what to say. He knew the ins and outs of Cosa Nostra. He told them that we had no idea who killed Paul. He said he was going to use Frankie and John to help him run the family and to investigate what happened. He told them not to discuss anything with anybody outside our family about the hit and not have any members carry guns or overreact to anything. Anything they heard or found out, they were to report it back through John Gotti or Frankie DeCicco. I think they were all shook up. They knew we probably did it, but they didn't know for sure, and they could see Joe Gallo was not saying, "Arm yourselves and get ready for war." He was communicating that they would be all right. Nobody was in trouble. Nobody was going to get hurt. We're going to have an investigation. Officially, this is how we went to the other families. We told them we didn't know what happened with Paul, but our family was intact. We weren't in a position that a war would break out. We had no internal trouble, and we didn't want anybody to get involved in our problems. A couple of weeks later, all the captains were called in again. The meeting was held in the recreation room of some big housing project in downtown Manhattan. Somebody knew somebody who gave us access to that room. Joe Gallo reiterates that we still don't know what was going on. We're still investigating, but the time had come to put our family together and vote for a new boss. Everybody has got the drift by now. It's all over the newspapers that John Gotti did the hit, and they can see the closeness of Frankie DeCicco, Sammy the Bull, Joe Piney, Joe Gallo. Between themselves before Paul was hit, Frankie and John have agreed that John will be the boss and Frankie the underboss. At the meeting, Frankie gets up and votes for John Gotti. It zips right around the room. Nobody opposes. It's unanimous. At that point, John announces that Frankie will be his underboss and that Joe Gallo will stay on as consigliere of the family. He says he's making Angie Ruggiero the captain of his old crew. Frankie's uncle, Georgie, will replace Frankie. Now I'm going to be made an official captain too, but I don't want it announced there. And then Toto Orella was at the meeting and he knew I was part of this whole move. I want to give respect to Toto and not have anything like that done while he's sitting there. I went to him afterwards and I told him that if he wanted to stay on as captain of the crew, I would start up a new crew. I said, it's completely up to you, whatever you want. And he said, Sammy, I'm tired. I've been using you as acting captain. I'd like to step down. I don't know who shot whom, nor do I ask. I only heard later from John that Vinny Artuso's gun jammed and he didn't get a shot off. Everything else went according to plan, and it was, as they say, elementary, my dear Watson. We agreed that no one involved in this operation would ever speak about it, under any circumstances, to anyone in or outside the family. The manner and place of Castellano's death transformed media coverage from minor interest to headlines reserved for a head of state assassination. Tabloids went all out. Big Paul, chauffeur, take their last ride. And the New York Times featured it on the front page above the fold for 2 days straight. Both Castellano and Bellotti were reported to have been shot 6 times. Each also received a coup de grace to the head. The city's police commissioner stated witnesses were uncertain whether 2 or 3 men carried out these gangland executions. No one remembered seeing 4 shooters, but most witnesses recalled that the assassins wore identical Russian fur caps and long coats, described as either dark or light-colored. The assassins were seen fleeing on foot toward 2nd Avenue. One witness said that one of the gunmen was holding a walkie-talkie immediately before the shootings. The head of the state's organized crime task force declared that such a violent death of Castellano would have required the formal approval of the bosses of the other 4 city families. Walkie-talkies were distributed so we could communicate during the operation. John then told everyone that Paul and Tommy Bellotti were the targets. We quickly reviewed each person's position and assigned roles. I left the park with John in a Lincoln. It may have been borrowed, not his personal car. Frankie told us Paul was headed to Jimmy LaRossa's office after court, likely not arriving at Sparks before 5. On the way uptown, we hardly spoke, our minds focused on the upcoming event. John parked the Lincoln on the northwest corner of 3rd Avenue and 46th Street, where crowds swarmed, just as planned. I saw the Sparks canopy and the shooters waiting by it in their white coats. Tony Roach was across the street, but I couldn't see the others near 2nd Avenue. Our parking was poor, sticking into the crosswalk, so John decided to circle the block again. He was concerned that Paul might arrive while we were repositioning, or a cop might ticket us and recognize John. After circling, we moved the car to a better spot and waited again. Soon, a Lincoln approached and stopped next to us at the light with its dome light on, revealing Tommy Bellotti and Paul inside. They were talking. Tommy was just 3 feet from me, which made me tense. I warned John via walkie-talkie that Paul would arrive shortly and prepared to shoot if Tommy turned towards me. No, we have our people in place, John assured me. But if Tommy sees us, they might change plans, I replied. The light changed, and Tommy pulled up at Sparks, but I only saw him exit the car. Suddenly, Tommy squatted, as if seeing something, then went down after a white coat approached from behind. I checked the street for any bystanders, reactions, but saw no one making a move. John drove slowly across 3rd Avenue into the block, and I saw Tommy bleeding heavily in the street, and I murmured, he's gone. I didn't see Paul exit the car, only the white coats approaching Tommy. We sped down 2nd Avenue back to Brooklyn, not seeing any shooters or backups. We listened to 1010 News, hearing reports of a shootout in Midtown Manhattan and the death of Paul Castellano. I was so shaken I couldn't recall anything else about the ride, even if offered millions. Frankie DeCicco met with me and John at my office to discuss information from Sparks' waiters. The waiters said Paul had been shot, causing Frankie to worry about his own safety and those in the car with Paul. Frankie mentioned running into Tommy Gambino as they left, and he advised him to leave immediately after the shooting. Gravano detailed the planning of the audacious assassination of Gambino family boss Paul Castellano. It was to take place in broad daylight during rush hour on a busy street outside Sparks Steakhouse, 46th Street, between 2nd and 3rd Avenue. The more we thought about it, the better it looked, Sammy said. We concluded that 9 days before Christmas, around 5 to 6 o'clock at night in Manhattan's middle, would be ideal. During rush hour, thousands of people would be on the street hurrying in all directions, creating perfect confusion for the hit. The plan was that the sudden chaos would work in our favor, and we could disappear into the crowd afterward. They decided this was the ideal time and place for the assassination, and it was set in motion. The day before, we held a meeting at my basement office on Stillwell Avenue with John and Angelo leading the hit team. John is handling the team because it's his problem, I thought, questioning why we should risk our own guys if it went wrong. Frankie DeCicco arrived with Joe Watts, making a total of 11 of us, including the 4 shooters from John's crew. Only John Carneglia was a made man among them. The shooters would wait for Paul at the front door of Sparks, on East 46th Street between 3rd and 2nd Avenue. Tony Roach Rampino would be a backup across the street, with Angie, Joe Watts, and Iggy Alagna as additional backups up the street. John and I would be in a car on the other side of 3rd Avenue, ready to act if needed. Sparks Steakhouse is in a sandwiched position, we thought, for strategic advantage. John told everyone that 2 guys would be killed, but he wouldn't reveal their identities yet, emphasizing it was a massive, unthinkable hit. No matter what, John warned, don't run, even if there are cops around, because if you do and the guys aren't dead, we'll kill you. The next afternoon, everyone except DeCicco gathered in a park on Manhattan's Lower East Side, overseeing the operation. Frankie was inside Sparks, ensuring Jimmy Brown and Danny Marino, the meeting's attendees, wouldn't do anything suspicious. Joe Watts drove me to the park, where the 4 shooters were disguised in long white trench coats and black Russian fur hats. Nobody could tell who they were. John's idea, and I thought it was brilliant. In New York, people often walk around naked and nobody notices, so outfits like these would confuse witnesses. What was their height? Weight? I don't know. Did they look alike? I don't know. These witnesses wouldn't be prepared for the event and would only remember the strange outfits, which could serve as crucial evidence